this
Thank you.
girl here. She's about 8 or 9 when this picture was taken. She didn't know that she was neurodiverse. Her parents did, and her teacher did. The teacher had told her parents that she had something called dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is, like all neurodiverse things, quite complex, but in the basic level, it affects your coordination, it affects your memory, particularly hand-eye coordination. It's fun when I can't find my mouse on the screen. It can get a little frustrating, but most of all, it controls the way I think sometimes. And the teacher had told my parents and said, really, what you should do is send her to what we used to call special school, which is where people who had learning difficulties went. My parents said, well, she can read. She'd been reading since she was very early. She can write all right. Her writing is really, really messy, but she can write. So we don't want to take her out of school. And so I stayed. Now, that school was quite a big primary school. I moved to a school that was nearer to my house that was built. And I was there for a year and a term. And I went from being, when I arrived in the second place, a year behind in maths, to, by the time I got up to secondary school, I was in the second tier group for maths. So clearly having a little bit more attention and a little bit more at smaller classes helped. Sorry, forgive me, quite a day. So when that journey continued and I got to high school, as we call it up here, got to secondary school, and you then have a bit of a problem. And the problem is that I couldn't learn. I couldn't learn like everybody else. You would, even something I was interested in, I found it very difficult to learn. My writing was chaotic, to say the least. Would drift away from the margin on the left-hand side, no matter how much I tried. They later found that I couldn't spell, but my handwriting was so bad, they didn't find that out until I was about 18. So that was a bit late. Now, when you can't achieve, when you can't do games, my physical activity was swimming. I could swim. I wasn't a fast swimmer. I did personal survival and life saving. But when you are not great at the other things, there is only one word for that, and that is stupid. You are stupid. You can kind of keep up, but when it comes down to it, you can't achieve. At the time when I was at school, we had a new school exam called a CSE, which was the precursor to GCSE. And that was assessed as you went along. And I did a number of those, and that's how I got my maths and my English O level. But I then needed to get other O levels, and that was not something that I was able to do very easily. It's not that I didn't like exams. I love exams. I love going in the exam hall and reading a question and giving my answer. Unfortunately, because of the way my brain works, I would often not give the answer that they were looking for. I would look at things in a different way, and that didn't necessarily come out well. So I needed, in order to go into higher education, I needed 5 O levels and 2 A levels. That's the baseline. The only subject that I could do at school was sociology. I absolutely adored sociology because it made sense. I love history, but I couldn't pass exams in it. The thing with sociology is there isn't a right and wrong answer. There is a make your case, explain what is your view, what is your opinion. And I could do that. So I got my O level and actually also my A level, albeit at the lowest grade in sociology. But the rest of them I couldn't get. At first, I thought I was going to become a social worker because that was the only way I could go to college and study sociology, right? It was social policy, social work. And then one weekend, I was working with the Red Cross. I'd been in the Red Cross since I was 10. I was helping an instructor teach some scouts. We were doing practical exercises, setting up car crashes and things like that for not literally, made up, for the scouts to climb all over and learn how to do first aid in a realistic situation. So we did that for 2 days over the weekend. I crawled into school on the Monday morning, and my sociology teacher asked me what was wrong. And I explained what I've been doing. And he said, why don't you stop with the silly idea of being a social worker and actually accept what you're good at? And that is being a teacher. Now, nobody had ever said that to me before. It had never crossed my mind. But I liked this guy a lot because he taught the subject that I could understand. So I just accepted what he said and went, okay, well, clearly I'm going to be a teacher then. I don't know why or how or whatever. I don't understand, but I'll do it. So I needed to get into higher education. To cut a long story short, I ended up staying on a third year in sixth form in order to get the 5 O levels and 2 A levels. It's actually mostly the O levels that were the problem. And the school could never work out why I couldn't pass these exams. It was a real trial, but eventually I squeaked what was required, and I had to go through clearing because I obviously didn't get the grades, and I ended up at Hull College of, I think it was Further and Higher Education when I got there. By the time I left, it was Humberside College of Higher Education, but it was Hull College at the time. And I went to do a social science honours degree, which was fine because we had, it was modular, as most things are now. And I realized from having dragged myself through school, particularly at the end when I was really having to revise myself most of the time, that I needed to have an approach to pass these modular exams, or the end of year, we had end of year exams. And so what I used to do was when I came back after Christmas, I would map out a framework for every conceivable question that I thought would come up. Because it was sociology, you had to learn a whole bunch of studies that underpinned the answer you were going to give, whatever that was. And I wrote this down, and every day between the beginning of January till the exams, which I think were in June, I rewrote these things. I literally wrote them out by hand hundreds and hundreds of times. And eventually I got enough in to stick. And somehow I got through and I got my degree. It did go to academic board. It was a little bit, I did scrape it, but I got it and I got my degree, which was amazing. When I got married immediately after college finished, and I needed to go on and do a postgraduate certificate in education. I didn't need to technically, because at that time, if you were teaching in a college, you didn't need any kind of teaching qualification. And actually, when I eventually arrived in Fife, in the management and business department I was in, only 2 of us out of, I think there were probably a dozen or slightly more, had teaching qualifications, but it never crossed my mind that I wouldn't learn how to be a teacher. So but my brother-in-law, who was older than me, had just come out of Ripon and York St John College, which at the time was the creme de la creme. That was the place that would give you the qualification to work in college as well as school. It was the bee's knees. Well, there's no way I was going there because he was a gifted teacher and he's had an amazing career. So I went to the second down that I could get into, which was Edge Hill in Lancashire. So I learnt to teach amongst kids from Lancashire and from Scousers. So basically, that's a really good way to learn to teach, really, because the school was near Ormskirk in Lancashire. Sorry, the college where I was. So I came out of there. That again was continuous assessment. There was no final exam. That was another criteria I had. And I came out of there qualified to teach school or college. So I went and I worked for a little while in a college in Gloucester. Then I worked for a little while for a college in Nottingham. And then we moved up to Rosyth in Scotland with my husband's job. So the way that I taught was that I had it in my mind that if you were expecting students to take notes at the time, they could either listen to you or they could take notes. They couldn't do both at once now. That was just from my perspective, but it seemed about right. So I used to give out notes for all my classes. And there were two things about them. One is they always had pictures on them so that you could go, oh yeah, the pull motivation talk that, or the push motivation talk, that's great because that's the one with the push on it. I can find that. I used to actually encourage my students to bring crayons in so that they could color it in during class. So they had, save them drawing hangmen or anything. And they obviously could write all over their worksheets. So this was the sort of thing that I did, because the important thing to me was that people had to believe that they could learn. That's the big step. And I spent quite a bit of time teaching returners and teaching mature students. And the biggest hurdle was that they had to believe they could do it. As soon as you had convinced them they could do it, it's what Terry Pratchett would call headology, I guess. Then very often they found themselves learning without really realizing it. And I'm sure that at that point I was tapping into what I had experienced myself. I did forget to tell you that when I was at Teacher Training College, that was when I found out that I had dyspraxia. I didn't know before. My tutor was doing the class. There were 12 of us in the class, and he was going through the learning difficulties, as it was called. And he described dyslexia. Well, I have members of my family with dyslexia. My cousin has. She's had an amazing career in hospitality, and I'm just so thrilled because it didn't look as if she could when she was trying to fight her way through school. But I knew what dyslexia was. And then he got to dyspraxia, and he started to identify the symptoms, as it were. And apparently I looked like I'd been slapped in the face with a wet fish. And he sort of turned, he looked at me and went, "Oh, you didn't know, did you?" And I went, "No." And he went, "Oh, yeah, you've got this. This is you." And I'm going, okay. So we kind of worked with that after that. So I did know by this point that I had dyspraxia, and that was part of the reason that I couldn't learn. So I had kind of a reason. It wasn't a superpower, and that's the other thing. Some people, in order to live with their neurodiversity, call it a superpower. That's great if it works for you. And there are some ways in which it is fantastic. But a lot of the time, as you will have realized from the story I've just told, it was a long way from being a superpower. It was something that made me feel stupid. And even in teaching, which I was actually quite good at, I was only a short step away from, yes, I can do this because I'm stupid. So I understand why the students can't learn because I'm also thick. Which you never said to the students, but that's what the voice was in my head at the time. So I did this for about 20 years. And then we got to the point where the courses, HNCs, HNDs, were starting to have exams. And I began to feel very uncomfortable because I could obviously teach students to pass exams, but it felt wrong to me because I couldn't pass them. So it felt as if I was trying to teach somebody to fly when I've only ever sat in the back of an aeroplane. It just didn't feel right. And I stuck at it for a while, but I knew my heart wasn't in it, and I didn't feel that I had what it took to be as good as I needed to be, because you have a big responsibility to everybody that you're teaching, to turn up to do the job to the best of your ability. And I'm sure everybody who teaches at any level feels like that. And I didn't feel I could do that as well as I wanted to. So my husband by this point was working in information security. And he said, He's incredibly intelligent. He learns very quickly. The community was quite small, especially in Scotland, so everybody knew him. And he said, well, you know, you could come across. He'd worked in incident management for a bank, and when there were incidents, we used to discuss them, and I always had, because I taught management and business, I always looked at things from the point of view of maybe this is why a mistake has been made, maybe this, you know, let's look at it with a slightly different perspective. And he said, well, maybe you should think about coming into InfoSec, because there aren't enough people in there who talk from a business perspective. So I said, oh, brilliant, that's all right. We worked for ourselves, so I didn't have to persuade somebody to give me a job. So I stepped across, and for the first wee while, I was most successful at talking. I mean, this is a shock, I'm sure, to you as you're sat there. But I spent some wonderful times with Isaka and went to some fantastic places. I think the place on the left is probably Amsterdam. I think the one in the middle is London. The one on the right is Munich. And I used to do a lot of stuff with Isaka, mostly because I spoke about human factors, which people really weren't doing at that time, and I made it sound straightforward, and also I didn't trip over the furniture, which comes from a quote from some actor or another who said that the art to acting is to learn your lines and not trip over the furniture. Well, surprisingly, I managed not to trip over the furniture anyway. So I did that. As far as generating business was concerned, it didn't help, because having worked doing what I've done for years, I always, by instinct, make things sound very simple and straightforward, because that's what I think a job is. And people will go, this is fascinating stuff, Wendy. And I go, yes, absolutely. And so, you know, I can come into your business and help you with this. No, we understand that now. We can do it. We don't, that's fine. Really good. Always sit in your talks. And you're sort of going, great. So we went years where my husband was the one earning the money. I would occasionally go and take notes if he was pen testing or whatever. And a pattern established that has gone on later, of him arriving on contracts and me sort of a bit later, they'd say, oh, we need somebody in risk. Do you know anyone? Oh, yes, Wendy will come and do risk for you. So I kind of always traveled along in his shadow, and that was a pattern that persisted. The other thing I was quite good at from quite an early time of working was asking questions. And this photograph was taken in about 2008. So I was still teaching at this point. My husband was speaking at a very interesting conference in Prague. And it was right next door to, I think they called them the secret police. I don't know exactly what they were, but it's the only time I'd been to a conference where there was somebody stood at the door at the back with a gun to make sure that people had a reason to be in there. It was very bizarre. And I'm stood there, and I saw this camera going around, and that, you know, there's free booze, free food, and people are talking, and especially when you have good-looking women around, young men are going to, you know, share their war stories of, you know, how they saved the Bank of England or whatever it was, and all of this came forward, and I'm stood watching this and going, but it's all being hoovered up. They're collecting everything you say, including some of the indiscreet things that perhaps you shouldn't say. That's absolutely fascinating. So while I was doing work with Isaka, or doing the talking with Isaka, I had met some amazing people. Vernon Poole being still a friend from Sapphire, and various others who are still friends of ours. And one of these who is sadly no longer with us, was this amazing fellow. This is Professor Gene Schultz. He was one of the pioneers of incident management in what we would now call OT. He was an amazing guy. And I went to him because he was at this event. And I said, Jean, look what's happening. And he said, what are you seeing? And I said, this is what I'm seeing. I said, why does that happen? Why do people not realize? And he said, that's a very good idea, Wendy. Why don't you go and find out? So I did. I bussed around and eventually got into Glasgow University and studied this area. This was before you had very good cameras on your phone, but by the time I left, you could do it with your phone. But I call this the virtual booth. Basically, your entire bandwidth is taken up by what you're doing. You still see this on the train. People having dreadfully insecure phone calls with people. You can listen in and hear how their sales figures are going down and all these kind of things. Or maybe that's just me. But I spent quite a long time studying with Glasgow. Because, of course, being me, it takes a long time. Now, I did end up, thankfully, ultimately with a master's in computer science by research. This would have shocked my poor computing teacher in my first degree, because he used to pay me in cider for testing the programs he was writing for local business. Because it was in the time where everything was done in C, I think. I don't know. Anyway, it was not what you would now see. It was pre-Windows. And he said I was he'd never met anybody who just didn't get computers. And if anybody could break them, I could. And you know, if he'd given them simple instructions, they had to be simple enough for me to use. So the fact that I came out with a master's in computer science, I think would probably confuse him a great deal. So asking questions then extended into writing textbooks, which are really just extended worksheets when you come down to it. The first textbook I wrote was for the BCS. Ian asked me to write this, and he allowed me to explore being an information security auditor, both as a computer science person, somebody who's maybe studied it at university, as well as somebody who with a more business head that has learnt the technical stuff, but looking at it from both ways, because I think our profession even then was broad enough to take people from more than one route. So I was allowed to produce that book. It taught me a great deal about writing, because the BCS have a very particular template, a very particular style, a very particular way of presenting things. And it's exactly what you need when you're learning to produce something like books. The second book I was involved in was this one. Now, this was really all my husband's work, but I wrote it down for him because he was so busy. We used to sit in the car and he would drive and I would type. That's kind of how that worked. But we wanted to call this book Incident Response for the Tired and Confused, because incidents very often, this was in the early days of fishing and things like that, incidents would happen in the middle of the night when everybody was tired. And you know, you'd wake up at 2 a.m. and you'd have to pull yourself together. And this was really at somebody who was a manager who'd had information security thrust upon them and incident response thrust upon them. So we eventually, it took us a long time, but we eventually created this book, and we were still speaking at the end of it, but we'll never write another book together. The third book that I've produced within my professional life is this one, and a literary agent came to me during COVID and said, if you could write a book about anything, what would it be? And I said, well, I don't want to get to the end of the COVID lockdown and everything, and there to be nothing positive to take out of this. We must try and learn something and just get some positives out of it. So he said, fine, and Taylor Francis picked it up. And so I wrote this at the same time that I had a full-time contract, a part-time job, and I wrote a book. Never again, not good for your mental health. I learned a lot about mental health doing that, but again, it's really an extension of what I can do. Now, around about the time that the last book was complete, I found out a little bit more about my neurodiversity because our daughter was officially diagnosed, she is an adult, with ADHD. And she told me, and of course, being the caring, loving parent, I said, but you've never been hyperactive. I could never get you out of bed. How can you have ADHD? She eventually calmed down because she was very cross with me for saying that, and quite rightly so. And she explained it to me. And then a little while later, she took me through the questionnaire that she'd done. And at the end of it, she said, congratulations, you're worse than me. And so we then sat down and discussed some of the things that are idiosyncratic to being having ADHD. So things like sometimes being entirely overwhelmed if you're in a room. I thought I had a hearing problem because I would be stood talking to somebody and I couldn't focus on what they were saying. I was having to lip read, and I thought that was a hearing problem. It actually isn't. And I now have these amazing things called loops, and I put those in my ear, explain to people that I'm not putting sort of earplugs in because I don't want to hear them. I will actually hear them better, which is quite fun to explain. That and other aspects of which I'll come to in a second, I have learnt gradually over time that things that I still was hanging to in terms of, but you can't do that because you're stupid. You can't learn. You can't pass exams. Imagine Mike trying to come into the technical profession, not being able to do CISSP, CISM, CGUI, anything. Couldn't do the exams. Had a number of trainers telling me that all I needed was to go to one of their classes and they could teach me. I used to take a deep breath before I explained to them that I was probably a better qualified teacher than they were, and please leave me alone, because it doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And in fact, I've had a number of things said about me or said to me, and that one in red was said a couple of years ago, maybe just a little bit more than a couple of years ago, when I was looking for a contract, when we back end of us working for ourselves. And this person said this to me, and I just was lost for words, which is why I've remembered, because it doesn't happen often. And I thought, I really feel for anybody who's working for you. If you think that the reason why I don't have these qualifications is because I don't want to have them. I mean, official tester of idiot-proof programs, you knew that. You're a non-threatening middle-aged woman. Yeah, it is a strength, I guess it was. Not really the one you want to hear, but it was said and meant well. So I've developed I'm learning to live with what I call my Tigger brain. And the way that I have been able to see it in action has been that I have taken to writing stories. Now, excuse me a sec. It is water, I assure you. It's not wine. Oh, goodness, no. Back in about 2010, I managed to become involved in with a panel of people who were producing teaching materials for a country out in the Middle East. This country wanted teaching material for every age of child from the age of 6 to the age of 18. And because I had a teaching qualification, I got the young age. Now, I have never been to the country that I wrote for, and I had no idea how to talk to children that small. I had done teaching practice in primary school, but it's a whole different thing, putting together cyber. And what I realized quite quickly was the way to do it was to use story, because that's how we learn from the youngest child. We teach our children about our culture, about our family, about the way they should behave, about history, whatever it is, we do it through story. We even do that, and you'll poke somebody's eye out with that, I guess, is a very short story, but it's there. So after that had finished, I toyed this around for a bit, and I eventually came up with this idea of a girl who sort of falls into Cyberland through a tablet device. Now, one of the rules is that she stays within this little robot who's called Webby. The local cartoonist in Falkirk, Jim Barker, used to do a lot of our illustrations for presentations at the time. And so he illustrated this for me, and he came up with, I knew roughly what Webby looked like, but he helped me a bit with that. And my kids said that he drew Nettie to look like me. Okay, probably, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But we did that. And the idea I carried around for about 8 years until I found the University of Buckingham Press, who published this. It published in August of 2020. Now, if you can cast your mind back that far, not a great time to be trying to do anything that needed publicity. So, and I'm not a marketing person, so I was absolutely hopeless. But it was published. I pushed it out with LinkedIn, of course, and later I went into schools, and I continue to do that from time to time. I go into schools, and basically they move all the classes past me, and we talk about cybersecurity using a story, because just like you learn about getting on with people by through Winnie the Pooh, or Hans Christian Andersen, or the Grimm brothers, they're teaching you that way. This was a way of giving the children a story in a attractive book that they took as a story, but it meant that the parents of the teachers could sit with them and start to discuss things like being responsible, not in the first book, not taking the tablet when you were told no, you have to ask permission, and things can go wrong. And then how important it is to go and tell somebody if you've seen something that's frightened you, for example. I was unbelievably lucky that the University of Buckingham Press gave me Rachel Lawsden, who is an amazing book designer. I didn't even know the profession existed, but she wins prizes. She now wins prizes as an author as well. She's an amazing woman, and she has put together all my Nettie books so far. So there's my Tigger bouncing around. And what happens is I get an idea, and it bounces off. And I kind of have to write it down, because otherwise it will distract me. So my Tigger brain is always there. I've written two Nettie's books since, one of which is the middle one was the last one I did with Jim. That's my favorite. Which one is Nettie? Because the point it's making is so crucial to a child being online, which is on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. No, you don't know who somebody is. So that's an absolutely critical story. One day, it would have been nice if the proper package of a book designer and Rachel had been able to do book two, but it just didn't happen like that. The book three is about sharing photographs and doing it properly, but it's also about things like not sharing somebody's photograph if they don't want them to. And they have that discussion with their parents, because sometimes our parents or their parents would have put up pictures that they don't like and don't think that they want that photograph up. And you need to be having that respectful discussion. A primary school teacher asked me to write for the upper part of primary school, and I came up with Isha and the Mud Monster Mystery. I have a friend from school who is of Indian heritage, and I asked her to create a character for me, and she named Isha. She told me all about her, what she wore, what she ate, what she called her grandparents, all of these things. So she created that character. Rachel again did the book design, and I had a different illustrator, Laura Wood, who's amazing. So that was just fantastic, and that came out just over a year ago. So with my Tigger brain was bouncing around and giving me all these ideas. And then in the editing bit of Isha, my editor, instead of writing Conan Doyle, wrote Cannon Doyle, Tigger leapt in, grabbed this, bounced around my head with it. I have heard an ADHD brain being described as having a head full of highly caffeinated squirrels, and I get that, but mine is Tigger. And I thought Conan Doyle sounds a great idea for a character, and so I devised these short stories for senior folk. My dad lives quite a long way away. I see him once a month. I needed to find a way that I could explain scams and social engineering. Not all of these are by computing. Some of them are by phone. Some of them are face-to-face. And they're short stories. They're about somewhere between 1,500, 2,000 words. And these I have published. I tried to give them away for the first year. That didn't work very well. They're too big for magazines, except for the Dot magazine, which if you saw in Scotland last year, an amazing Kirsty put this Dot magazine and had the first Conan Doyle story in that, which was just amazing because it's a fantastic publication. But I couldn't do, but I found that I could publish these through Kindle, which is great because it means that people can expand the print so they can see them. I went to an acting coach. It was an acting coaching weekend with a bunch of actors. I've been on two, one to learn how to tell stories in school, and this one learning how to narrate stories. So I've narrated, there are 11 stories so far. I've got 6 of them laid down as narration, and at some point we will work out how to get those onto Audible so that they can get into the hands of senior folks. So, you know, sometimes ADHD can produce really useful stuff, usually at the wrong moment when I'm supposed to be doing something else, but you know, I'm learning for that. Work highlights, I just want to throw in just to prove that I do actually do some work. I wrote a history book of our local church, which was supposed to be about 30 pages and ended up being 375. And I wrote it from the point of view of the church, which was 150 years old at the time, telling it was like an autobiography, which was fun. And straight after I'd finished that, I went to do a piece on working out the risk profile for digitisation of the National Records of Scotland. So that was brilliant. I was at Scotland Census, which of course went out in 2022, but I was there when COVID was called. And I learned an awful lot from everybody there about risk, and learning through doing is always better for me. And then during COVID, I ended up at Test and Trace, and again, just a hell I would not want to go through again. I've never seen so many people burn out in computing and in cyber as I did. And as I said before, I slightly overdid it as well, but I think a lot of us did. It wasn't working from home, it was living at work. So, you know, that was the way that worked. So I have worked, and I do continue to work, but I wanted you to be aware of that. The other thing I want you to be aware of is that, you know, not all that glitters is gold. It seems as if I'm a highly accomplished author. It is not true. Yes, Nettie and Cyberland was finalist of the Cyber Book of the Year Awards for the Real Cyber Awards, and they're meaningful, by the way, because if they don't have somebody that's good enough to win the prize, they literally break the prizes on the stage. They're made of glass. It's an amazing experience, an amazing awards, and so friendly. But she was a finalist against, you know, proper textbooks. Was completely amazing. So, but remember what I said, that the writing is actually a very small part of the production of these books. You've also got illustrator, you've also got a book designer, and also an editor as well. And it is a team job. A book is not just one person's work. The Conan Doyle series was a finalist in the Cyber Trailblazer at the Digitech Awards last year. This time it wasn't even against other books. It was against some amazing things that innovation that people had made. I still don't know. I mean, I applied because I thought it would be interesting to apply, but I had no expectation that I would get as far as being a finalist. Yeah, again, although I published these on Kindle, My son, who has a master's in creative writing, he does the editing for me, so I can't. Nothing is one person on their own, and we work together very well. And then the third is this one, and this is Isha winning the award at the Cyber Book of the Year, but it is the book that won. And again, we are talking about a book designer, we're talking about an illustrator, we're talking about Taluchan, who gave me Isha in the first place. I just wrote a story, which is actually the easiest bit of the whole thing. So you're always part, or when you're producing these things, you're always part of a team. So when somebody sort of goes, oh, you're amazing, you go, you're only seeing a little bit. It's actually not like that. And here's the worst bit of this for me: there will be no more Nettie and Isha books. And the reason for this is that they cost £7,000 to publish, because they're self-published. They're what used to be called vanity publishing, and I just can't afford it. With Isha, people had said, come to me next time and I'll help, and I did, but unfortunately this was when we were just crawling out of COVID, so everybody's budgets were tight. I got sponsorship from Sapphire, from Scotland IS, from iConfidential, from Risk Crew, and from a number of private individuals. And that did help, but we still had to stomp up a sizable amount of money, and I just can't do it anymore. I've been to book agents, and they're either cyber people and they don't want the children's book bit, or they're book agents for children, but they don't get they don't see the cyber. The other way of looking at it is one that I came to the startling realization of just after Christmas. I got a note back from this very nice publisher who I'd been talking to, and I thought this was going really well. And I got an email back from him, and he said, Nettie is brilliant. It's such a good idea. It's so important for children today to be learning about cyber from the earliest possible days, to understand, not to trust people online, all of these things. We absolutely get it, but we can't take it. We can't publish it. So the only way for me to interpret that was, the idea is brilliant, your writing's actually crap, but the concept is brilliant. So that's quite hard. That is quite hard. I also, it pains me to think that I will not be able to. I have a number of other ideas, you can imagine, number of other ideas that I want to particularly progress with Nettie, and a couple of people have said, this is what we would like you to do with Isha, but I can't. And I those of you who've been attached to me with LinkedIn for a while will know that at the beginning of January I made this, and this was not a please come back and tell me that I'm wonderful. It was a, guys, I'm sorry. As someone said, the books are still out there. You can get them on Amazon. Please order them from your local bookshop if you can. But it can't be done anymore, and it is. I just have to accept that, because I've done everything I can, and that's it. And lots of people have also tried, and there's no way. Publishers are not interested. So that's where I am. And Conan Doyle is fine, because I can publish that. I just need to find people who will give them to their elderly folk, because I went and spoke to the University of the Third Age in Glasgow just before Christmas, and we had an amazing time. We went through one of the scenarios in one of the books, and we talked about how, because it's not about giving you the answer, Conan Doyle, the local vicar, basically, like Isha does as well, has to discover the answer themselves, has to discover the defense themselves. Conan Doyle is also slightly humorous, and it also has a cast of recurring characters, so kind of like Midsummer Murders, except without the murders. And yes, you do get to see characters more than once, which is what I always missed with Midsummer. But so I will, when I'm not doing, I'm currently doing a bit of government research, and I barely have time to breathe. But when I come out of the other side of that, I'm sure there'll be more Conan Doyles. Whether anybody will read them, I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. My friends do, and that's something. But in the meantime, I have, at this stage in my life, found my tribe or tribes. The most important one is Arcanum. Arcanum is a small organization. That's everybody that was at our annual conference. There's not a lot of us. As you can see from the certifications and the badges at the bottom, they bat way above their pay grade for the size of the company. It's amazing, and I'm surrounded by incredibly talented and knowledgeable people, and I get to work in teams and learn a lot. And it's just amazing that they had me, because I don't have qualifications, but they kind of knew me because they knew Matthew. So I kind of got in that way as usual. But it's that I don't anticipate working anywhere else ever. This is my tribe. I've been in the information security special interest groups more or less since I came into cyber, certainly as soon as I joined the BCS or very soon thereafter. And they're a great bunch of people. And again, some crazy, crazy smart people in that group, which I love being around. BCS women, I don't do nearly enough for them. There's a lot of very active women in there, women who do a lot of mentoring. I always shy back from that because I always say, because I didn't come a sort of computer science route, I'm not a very good person as a mentor because I can't really tell people which way to go. I love my BCS diverse IT group. Because we're all diverse. They're not here because they're all away having their AGM, and I have put my apology in. But they are just the most amazing, supportive people. We all have neurodiverse challenges in there, and they're just amazing. And we always finish on time. Which you would not think, but is absolutely true. And as was said at the beginning, a couple of years ago, I was allowed onto the community board, which is the bit of the BCS that looks after us, looks after the groups like this one, and it looks after us as individual members. It represents our voice. And so that's the point. It's listening. And I think the role of both the community board and the council has got bigger, because we're stepping back down and we are talking to people perhaps more than has been aware until recent times. And then just over a year ago, I got voted onto the BCS Council, which is a huge honour, massive. I pinch myself when I'm around these people, because this is about taking BCS forward and making BCS good in society. So I'm the one in the corner that's always going, glass ceilings, actually, can we have glass walls so that we allow graphic designers and other people that use computers as well? Can we have those in, please? Pretty please. So that tends to be what I do, as well as supporting the other groups that I'm a member of. So I can be a bit of a pain that way. And this is my proud moment of being a BCS fellow. I was encouraged, no, I think almost bullied by a couple of people to apply for this. And again, thankfully, with the development of the BCS, you don't have to have a computer science degree. You have to be making a contribution to computing in the community. And so I got my fellowship, which is huge. I mean, those people they're just fantastic people. And just to hear what they do and what they know was a great thing. And there's Steve at the back there. He's the information security special interest group chair, and he's smiling away at the back. He's always doing that. So we do the very best. So I just want to leave you with a thought. Oh, I should say, yes, I did get my chartered. I still don't know how, but I suppose I've been working in risk a long time, and I probably know more than I think I do. And I can tell good stories. I don't mean lies. I mean, I can explain what I did in terms of a story. And I think that helped a bit. But imagine for a moment somebody who 2 and a bit years ago was told, if you're serious about being in this profession, you'll roll your sleeves up and get the certifications. And I'm now a chartered fellow, and I'm chartered with the Cybersecurity Council. That is something that is a little bit unreal to me. I'm very glad for it. Don't take them away from me. You know, I'm very protective, but it means that I was doing something right and that I need to carry on and do more. But I want to leave you with this thought, and that is that I'm just me. You know, I'm not one of the special people that I mentioned at the beginning who are truly inspirational, and some of whom have shelves full of prizes that say how inspirational they are, and rightly so. And of course, Lisa has an MBE, I think, for her work. I'm not like that. I'm just somebody in InfoSec who has ADHD and dyspraxia. And I have good days and bad days like everybody else. These last few days, going back through the story I've just told you, have been very hard days, because I've had to remember some of the struggles that I've been through that I'd kind of put to one side. I'm not saying this is therapy. I didn't want to do it, but hopefully it's been good for somebody there. All that anybody can ask is that you're the best you can be. And if there is a trick to that at all, it is find the thing that you love. Find the thing that you like doing in work, the thing that gives you satisfaction, and then find a job that will let you do that. Failing that, do the job that pays you and do that for hobby. But, you know, ideally, find the bit of InfoSec or cyber or technology or whatever it is that you really buzz for, and do that, and use every bit of yourself, whatever you're like, whatever talents or disabilities or challenges you have, use them, learn to use them, and be amongst people who understand. I'm always upfront with my colleagues and say to them, look, you're going to have to tell me this 4 or 5 times before I understand it. I'm really sorry, but this is the way that things are. I'm old enough now that I don't get as embarrassed when I have to do that as I used to. But that is me. I don't know if anybody's had any questions, or if you've all just nodded off, but I will stop sharing my screen, because you do not need to see that, oh God, frankly, twice the size I should be, woman sat at her computer, and I can have a little water. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. That was quite insightful presentation. And as you know, taking me back to the drawing board, I do not have any excuse. And I bet this has been encouraging to a whole lot of people, thinking they could not be who they want to be. And so that's really inspirational to let us know we can be whatever we want to be. And so there's been a few questions. I'll just try to go through the chat and read those to you. First of all, there's a question from Stuart asking, do you take medications for ADHD?
I don't. My daughter does. I don't. Because in order to do that, I'd have to go through the whole formal process. So I'm a bit old for that now. So I don't. Maybe if I did, things would be a little bit easier. But I've heard about the waiting lists for formal diagnosis. So I kind of live with it, or rather, my family and my colleagues have to live with it. I think they get the worst end of that.
All right. Thank you for that. Secondly, there's another one asking, how do you manage with the demand to do your side work with your work?
Work is always, the day job is always the thing that has to be done. The thing with the Tigger brain is I've learnt that if I write it down, I can leave it. It's fine. I don't write it down, put it away. I have a place to write things down, and then I go back. The day job is the day job, and I'm passionate about doing that. So it's really easy, if I wasn't careful, it would be really easy to just go, oh, it's fine. All I do is I just keep moving the mouse a bit so that I'm still show green on Teams and I can be going away writing another Conan Doyle story. That's not authentic, and I can't do that. If we have a slow day, or if I have a time when I'm between projects, yeah, absolutely, I'll do something else, but I'm always at my desk, and that's the most important. Absolutely have to be authentic to the people who pay my bills, because that's the only way to be. I can't, they trust me, so I have to earn that trust.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this truly inspiring presentation. Some people have asked how to get your books. I think there was someone that responded with the link to some of the books on Amazon. Is there any other place to get the books apart from
Well,
Amazon?
yeah, I mean, obviously the books for the elderly, you do have to go through Amazon because they're Kindle books, and please do, because I'm very passionate about those too. But the Netty books and the Isha book, get the details and take them to your local bookshop, even if it's a Waterstones. I don't mind. Please go to your local bookshop if you can, because I'd rather you did that. I think Amazon won't miss the royalties. Go and take it to your local bookshop and get it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And there's someone asking, do you have any coping strategies for ADHD?
Uh, um, I tell you, right. Okay. I don't know if it's quite a coping strategy, but um, 3 years ago, I was going on a holiday with some friends and girlfriends, and we were uh, it was a long weekend, and one of the things we were going to do was pony trek. Now, I'd never sat on a horse, and I thought it'd be really embarrassing to sit on the wrong way, and find yourself facing the tail. So I went to the local stables and started taking riding lessons, which is not easy for somebody with dyspraxia. Imagine I'm trying to control an animal with 4 legs, and I can't even really know where my hands are half the time. I'm still doing that. And in fact, last Friday, when I had a particularly bad day at work, which was a combination of a lot of things, including being very tired, I went off and I had my riding lesson. Now, when you get on a horse, I don't know how many of you have ever done this, but if you sit on a horse, you have to be there in the moment with them. You can't do anything else. I guess the same would be true of sport, especially if you're playing squash. You've got to have your mind or else it hurts. So for me, that's my coping mechanism. I only do it once a week because otherwise I would be taking time out of work. But I have this sort of hour and a half by the time I've got back. And that helps me because it's something that makes me take me out of myself. All sorts of other, it's very individual thing, I think.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if there are anyone else with any question. Okay,
Oh,
Stuart.
Sharon, thank you. I've just seen Sharon's comment. That's so sweet. Sharon is one of those people that encouraged me to apply for fellowship, her and Gillian. So she's always been a great supporter and an encourager, and occasionally somebody who will stand and say, Wendy, pull yourself together.
Fantastic.
Everybody needs a Sharon.
Absolutely. So we need to go get one Sharon
Mm-hmm,
for ourselves. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sharon, for that awesome push.
Let's have a look.
Yeah.
How bad? Oh, I noticed
Yeah,
somebody says, "How bad are your bad days?"
exactly.
Um, yeah. Uh, I can get very frustrated. I get very upset. Um, my default on a bad day is, apologizing for the air that I'm taking up. Um, I get very depressed very, very quickly. Um, Sometimes I will eat things that I really shouldn't eat a lot of, and then I hate myself for eating them. you know, eating instead of one chocolate, eating a bar, and then
mm,
the voice in your head goes, yeah, well, you're a pig, aren't you? It's just no wonder you can't do this. So yeah, I'm not always good at it, but yeah, a bad day is I don't I don't belong here. I don't know why I'm doing this job. I don't know how I got through the door. And no wonder people aren't interested. No wonder I can't get a publisher, because of course it's because what I'm doing is a great idea, but it's rubbish.
wow. So how do you come out of that then?
um, how do I come out of that? It's hard sometimes. Sometimes I try and give myself something else to think about.
Mm,
Go and talk to a friend, and not necessarily about me. Talk about them, what they're doing. I've had a friend who's just come back off a cruise. That was great. She spent an afternoon telling me what she was seeing on her cruise, and that was great. It took me out of the headspace, um, because it's very, very easy to become just so insular, that looking out and being alongside somebody else is great. My family are incredibly tolerant, of course, because they're used to me, but you know, they will say, you're not doing well. Have you thought about maybe going for a walk or something? So that's, but they can last for several days, as I'm sure some of you will be aware. I'm not alone in this. I know lots of other people
mm,
um, along that way.
sure. Thanks for that. I think there are two more questions here. Does most of your knowledge of ADHD come from your daughter or mostly from books? And if it is
Uh,
books, what books are those?
which um, Kate told me the basic stuff. She's a postdoc researcher in aging and dementia. So it's a good person to have on your team, because if you start getting dementia, she'd notice. So when I'm having a bad day, I know I'm all right. But no, she explained the basic, and then I started to think. I have to confess to looking at things online. My Facebook feed now constantly gives me videos of things about ADHD. Although there is one guy, and I can't remember his name, but he's the one that talks about having a head full of over caffeinated squirrels. So I suspect if you put that phrase in, you'd find him. And he does a lot of these short bite size where people go, "This is what it is for me," and I sort of go, "Yes, that's it. Okay, right. This is just my brain now. This is not me. This is my brain doing this." And sometimes that's helpful if you know. It's kind of like when my body hurts, because I'm old enough that I have days when my body just goes, sit at the table, don't do anything else. Sometimes I need to know that it is just that my brain is fried, or I'm overwhelmed. That's a phrase I didn't understand what being overwhelmed was until I began to understand what this, and so much of the way that I've struggled with life and struggled with who I thought I was turns out to be, at least in part, to do with the ADHD that I've had, that I live with Tigger.
Wow.
And no, Sharon, you weren't a bully, you were an encourager. That was the bad word to use. I apologize. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think the final question would be just in addition to how bad are your bad days? So there's a flip questions asking how good are your good days?
My good days, I mean, doesn't it, it sounds manic, doesn't it? My good days are um usually either I've achieved something at work. That's quite hard for me to pat myself on the back, because I'm always part of a team. So it's always somebody else in the team that's really carried that. But it's when I've achieved something. And these days it tends to be the little Conan Doyle things, because they tend to be a bit more me than other things. But good days can be like bathing in a really, really warm sea. It's lovely. It's lovely. I don't. I'm not good at resting. I'm not good at taking time off at all, as my HR person would tell you. So maybe one day I will get into the habit of doing that, because I think I make things worse by not actually resting enough either. So, good days are good. Good days are good.
That's so great. Thank you so much for such a inspiring session, Wendy. I've learned so much, and I believe all of us here have learned so much from you, and that gives us the the needed energy to take on who we really need to be, whatever it is we've been seen as an excuse not to be who we should be. Now we have the courage and we have all it takes to go ahead and pursue it. And I think one is quite instructive thing Wendy mentioned was that find your tribe. And I would love to say that BCS Edinburgh branch is a tribe to belong to. BCS as a body as well is a tribe that would more than happy to appreciate you for whatever it is you have, whatever skill set, whatever it is. We're more than happy to associate with you. So please reach out to us on our social media platform on LinkedIn. Please follow us, send us a message, and much more. Please follow Wendy. Wendy is on LinkedIn. I believe she's on Facebook as well. Please follow her, and I believe she's going to be churning out interesting content pretty soon if she hasn't started yet. So,
You never know. I would just say in your talking about the tribe being Edinburgh, I would particularly, and I do particularly encourage anybody who's a student or is just coming into cyber, if you get yourself into your local branch, it can mean the world because you can go and ask the silly questions, you can go and be alongside people, and you start to feel that you're in the right place. So absolutely do that, and Edinburgh is a good place to start.
absolutely. And we love it right here, Edinburgh. So, um, thank you once again for making our time to join us tonight. If you can, please put a reaction and put a clap for Wendy. Let's celebrate Wendy for that awesome, awesome, inspiring session. Thank you so much, Wendy, for making our time tonight. It's been lovely having you, and we hope whenever we do call you again, you would make our time for us. And yes, we are completely transformed tonight, and we as a branch normally hold our meetings first Wednesday of the month. So we're looking forward to another session next Wednesday, and we'll keep you posted on the next session we're going to be having. Thank you so much for the time tonight. And the recording is going to be made available. You will get that, I think, in your email after this session or in the course of the week. Thanks again. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.